All right. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Good morning to all of our webinar attendees. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Isa Litton, and I will be your moderator. May I first say welcome to the first webinar in the Forest series. Forest, by the way, stands for Future of Real Estate Sustainability Talks. It is an initiative brought to you by the country's foremost sustainable and green developer, that is ARTHALAND Corporation. So Forest, what we have here today is an avenue for ARTHALAND to share its vision of building sustainable legacies to different audiences. And that is why we are very, very grateful that you signed up and joined us today. So as advocates of sustainability, ARTHALAND is committed to taking the first steps in inspiring others to understand the value of creating spaces that benefit people and planet. This morning, we will be zeroing in on the art of master planning and how it can create communities that are sustainable, well-connected, inspiring, and thriving at best. We are very happy to have here with us local and global experts who have graciously accepted our invitation to share their knowledge and insights. Now, before we get started, we would like this to be a very interactive webinar in the sense that should you have any questions at all, please do type them into the question box below at the Zoom control panel. So if you look down on your screens at the bottom, the lower right side, you will see a Q&A button. Just click on that and type in your questions, and I'll be glad to bring them up during the Q&A portion at the end of our presentations. So I hope everybody's ready. Without further ado, let us begin. Our first speaker comes from the internationally renowned U.S. Green Building Council. It is an organization that is committed to a sustainable, prosperous future through leadership in energy and environmental design, the leading program for green buildings and sustainable communities worldwide. Their mission is to transform the way buildings and communities are designed, built, and operated, enabling a healthy and prosperous environment that improves quality of life. So, shall we welcome our first speaker, the Managing Director for Southeast Asia and Middle East Markets for Green Business Certification. We have Mr. Gopalakrishnan Padmanabhan. Good morning, Gopal.
Good morning, Isa, and thanks for this opportunity to be part of the Forest series by ARTHALAND. So, over the next 10 minutes, I thought I will share with you some perspectives about what is the work we are doing and what is it that we are collaborating with ARTHALAND as well. So first of all, I hope all of you are safe wherever you are, because we are in very unusual times. But at the same time, I think all of us need to be impressed with the resiliency we have shown in terms of overcoming this crisis, and this too shall pass. So as part of US Green Building Council, we just finished 25 years, 2 years back. And as Isa said, we actually are the leading organization in pushing green and sustainability to the rest of the world. So our flagship brand has been LEED, the leadership in energy and environmental design, which is very simple. I mean, just founded on, 5 pillars. How does, a building save on energy? How does a building save on water? How does the building become responsible on waste? And how does it impact the carbon footprint? And lastly, how does it add to the human experience of the occupant? So this being the story which we have been doing over the last 25 years. And today, I think we all should be very proud that we as Mother Earth, we have done pretty well. So close to 20 billion square feet across the world works with us. And that includes Philippines as well. And Philippines done wonderfully well. Close to 165 million square feet has been working with us. And I think most importantly, I think in Philippines, I think the nationally determined contribution, the NDCs to the Paris Agreement, has been the background, I think, to whatever Philippines has done. And the real estate industry within Philippines has directly impacted this particular transition. And I think Philippines, a country, it is committed to reducing emissions by 70% by the year 2030. And we are all aware about the impact of climate change And so the Philippines example is something which is very, very impressive, for USGBC and LEED as well. Uh, and just to add to the point now, how do green buildings and LEED buildings impact you? As Isa rightly said, it's a question of people, planet, as well as profits. Now, all LEED buildings do save on money. And how do they save on money? Because there is a 20 to 30% reduction in terms of energy and water, and that's very important. And lastly, as I said, it does impact the health and well-being of the people inside the building. And these are some of the statistics I want to share with you. This is a bit technical, but I'll try to unravel it for you. So if you actually see the numbers, every building which is going green or LEED or anything does save on energy. So if you look at the LEED Platinum, see the energy which is utilized per square feet in terms of metric ton, right? We are talking about emissions here. It is 0.004, and that's a 56% reduction in terms of energy. Similarly, transportation. What is transportation? Transportation is, all of us use some mode of transport, again, in a pre-COVID era. So we may be using, let's say, a metro train, or we could use a shared vehicle, etc. So LEED buildings do calculate how do the occupants, how do the customers of retail, how do they move from their home to wherever they are. And again, you will see there's a 43% reduction, in terms of carbon footprint. These are all numbers which are live, and that's the impact we are doing to society. And we also did a survey in US where we found that employees, and when I say employees, you can actually say, this could be anybody in a building. This could be, let's say, people residing in residential buildings. These could be people who walk into retail outlets. Because the fact that you're talking about a healthy building, people are happier, healthier, and more productive in a LEED or a green building compared to a conventional building. And in response to the COVID, we as USGBC, we've also launched a lot of re-entry strategies for buildings and residential buildings. And that's the thing we are going to work with ARTHALAND also very closely, whether it is in terms of their existing assets or futuristically, even the Savina Park as well. And some of the things we've also done, added back to the Mother Earth, is resiliency. I think I'm sure that Philippines, like the rest of the world, is being impacted by climate change, right? So we have typhoons and cyclones hitting us. So it is very important that green building also becomes resilient. So in response to that, we actually added a new dimension to green building by saying that even the power part of it, the power comes into a building. Now, how do you measure it? How do you measure the resiliency, redundancy, and the quality of power getting into a building and a city so there are no more blackouts? So you are now talking about resiliency as well. So coming to ARTHALAND, again, let me thank you for this opportunity. So ARTHALAND has been a very responsible, I would say, stakeholder in the world. So close to 7.5 million square feet are already working with this, whether it is residential or commercial. More importantly, I think ARTHALAND has put emphasis on the capacity building. So their team is already educated in LEED. We have some formal exams that they have passed, and people like Ariane and Christina, who are part of the team, are called LEED professionals because they have passed our exams and they have set very high benchmarks in terms of understanding the LEED concepts as well. So thank you, Christina and Ariane, for your leadership. And moreover, ARTHALAND is also an USGBC member. So that signals the commitment they have for sustainability, not only for today, but for the future as well. And that brings us to the core subject of today morning, which is ARTHALAND Savina Park, which has become the first project in Philippines to earn USGBC's LEED Platinum certification for neighborhood development. So my congratulations to the entire team. It could be the external stakeholders, it could be the architects, the designers, the project teams from outside ARTHALAND and the people within ARTHALAND, because achieving platinum is not a simple thing. It's a very complicated, it requires integrated approach by every stakeholder. So I'm aware that a lot of hard work has actually gone into it, and they have got 80 points, which is a phenomenal achievement. And obviously, as all of you are aware, Savina today is a combination of residential as well as commercial spaces. And this is a certificate we have given to them from USGBC in Washington, D.C., signed by our CEO personally, with a personalized letter which actually appreciates whatever they have done. So, what is neighborhood development all about? And why should somebody go for neighborhood development? So, couple of features, for example, a neighborhood development has got access to high quality transit. I talked about carbon footprint, bicycle network. It's a pedestrian friendly community. There's a lot of rainwater management which happens. There is a protected biodiversity. There is a reduction in terms of the energy being utilized. And, so you can actually go on, and I've just sort of summarized that. So very importantly, Savina Park is going to give an example in Philippines about how you can positively impact climate change, how you can positively impact human health, how you can impact water. Today, water is at a premium, right? So we all talk about how the next wars are going to be fought on water. So it is our responsibility to make sure that whatever we do saves on energy, saves on water, biodiversity, regenerative materials, because today I think we are in a situation where resources are limited. And finally, how do you build a green economy and a green community? And that has been the center for our lead neighborhood development, which has been converted by ARTHALAND into practice as well. And all the residential spaces which are going to come inside Savina are actually going to tick all these 5 boxes. But I would actually look at the first box, which is protecting human health. And that is for us paramount in any lead building what we do across the world. And I'm happy that ARTHALAND has actually placed a lot of emphasis on protecting human health. What is the future? So, Savina has become, LEED Platinum. Is the end of the journey? No. As US Green Building Council, we are going to be working with Savina Park. We are going to be working with ARTHALAND to ensure how can we move Savina Park to become a net zero space? How can it become positive? Now, what do you mean by positive? Can Savina Park start giving back energy, start giving back water to the community? Yes, it is possible, right? And that's something which we will be doing, alongside them as well. So this particular Savina Park has actually, got, it actually has got everything for everybody. Now, there could be owners and developers who are going to come into Savina Park, who are going to look at economically vibrant development, forward-looking design. That's very important. And the Savina Park is also going to ensure that it's going to positively impact the community around them. It is not only about Savina Park, but it's about the community around Savina Park, which are positively going to impact this particular field. And I do understand that a lot of students in this call. So I just wanted to make sure that you also know that today, I think as Philippines, the country and the world, the most important thing is education. So we have a lot of programs by which we can add capacity to architectural students and civil engineering students. And USGBC, along with ARTHALAND, will ensure that Philippines not only grows in terms of the green quotient, but we will also positively impact the careers in the future of students, because students ultimately, they are our future. And I leave this as my last part of the presentation. So, so we are a very elite community where we have architects today, project team today. So ARTHALAND has achieved green, Savina Park has achieved green. Is it enough? I will say no. What should be our future objective? Our objective should be, can we become inclusive? So when I say inclusive, can green go beyond these developments? Can green go into every nook and corner of Philippines? Take a village. There could be schools there. There could be communities there. So we as, possibly, a blessed team within this, can we impact the tier 2 towns? Can we impact the villages? So can we take the goal that green building should be for every Filipino citizen within this generation? So I'm going to leave that thought. And again, thank you for this opportunity. Isa, back to you.
Wow, thank you very, very much for that, Gopal. Not necessarily just for your informative insights, what a wonderful presentation, but leaving us with that thought. Can green buildings and communities be inclusive? That's actually a goal, not just a thought. I'd like to think that's something we should all work on. But yes, for the presentation, thank you again, Gopal, on why LEED certified or green buildings and communities are indeed relevant, not just for people or the planet. I love the particular insights on economy as well. Everybody loves that word, savings. Right? Thank you for that. By the way, I know Gopal actually brought this up already, but we would also like to proudly share that Savina Park is the first and only master-planned mixed-use community in Southeast Asia to achieve platinum certification for both LEED for neighborhood development and LEED for homes categories. If you're in the audience, please do share with us our virtual round of applause, because it's something we are very, very proud of when it comes to Savina Park. And again, thank you, Gopal, for that. Now let's proceed to our next speaker. He is from the internationally renowned Boston-based practice, Sasaki Associates. Now, for over 60 years, Sasaki is built on 6 core disciplines, and they are architecture, interior design, planning and urban design, space planning, landscape architecture, civil engineering, and a range of interdisciplinary expertise that foster holistic approaches to generating design that is as beautiful as it is functional. They believe that design has the power to improve the world around us. So here to give us his presentation, please welcome Sasaki's principal urban designer. We have Mr. Romil Sheth. Hi, Romil.
Hi, thank you, Isa. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me here, and especially to the ARTHALAND team, Jimmy, Leo, Gabby, and also Andy and Manny that we worked with extensively on the Savina Park project, which was an incredible kind of experience. And I want to kind of reflect on that work that we did a couple of years ago, but also on some broader themes that kind of drive our practice in the way we think about master planning and urban design at a kind of a larger scale. This kind of image here shows the density and growth projections, globally, and you can see the amount of kind of urban population and inflation that's happening across the world, which is, in a lot of ways, a good thing. It kind of creates densities. It creates, urban agglomerations that lead to, greater elevation of population. But at the same time, it also kind of creates certain challenges around density, around public space, around creating great communities, and sustainability plays a very important role within that. One of the things that we are always inspired by are different cities, and whether it's this image of Central Park in New York, where you have incredible density, but you also have incredible access to public space. Where people have access to one of the largest kind of urban parks globally, or in Paris, and where you have this image of the Champs-Élysées, and the kind of great kind of green kind of avenues leading up to it, that also get closed off for great kind of festivals and events that bring the city together. Or this image of a park with kind of great trees and vegetation, and again, access to kind of public space. And so within this context, I'm going to talk very quickly and at a high level about what brought us to kind of Savina Park, and some of our kind of design kind of ideas that kind of relate to what Mr. Gopalakrishnan was just talking about. But this is an image of the site where you see project site, and it talks about the larger kind of agricultural kind of setting of the Philippines, of Manila, and of the Laguna and the Cavite kind of region around it. It's interesting, when we first had the project, it was called Project Sugar because of the legacy of the sugarcane kind of plantations there. And there's something very kind of poetic about that, and that's taken on a whole new level now with Savina Park. But one of the things that we did look at, just from these larger preoccupations of looking at cities and public space, was to create a community that was different from what you'd find anywhere else in the Philippines, where it was not only mixed use and brought together different kind of residential components as well as mixed use components, but also created scales of open spaces for the community to gather, to recreate, for socialization, but also created some very intimate spaces for residential areas, for for housing, and as well as for the mixed use component. So we did have this idea of two active and passive arcs, which also became places to harness stormwater, to kind of bring in native vegetation and to bring in a lot of the green features that Mr. Gopalakrishnan was speaking about, and that really formed the armature for this lead ND neighborhood. And here's some images that kind of show you how, even though you are in a fairly, in a community that's not in the city, it still has a great sense of place. And there's a kind of poetic sense of place to that, that brings people together, and gives them a sense of belonging. And so it's not only these shared spaces that allow the same kind of activities that you might find in larger cities, but also these intimate spaces between villas and townhouses and apartments that become secondary spaces for people to kind of recreate, relax, for kids to play in. And I think it's important to recognize the role of public space in creating sustainable developments, but also creating kind of great communities. And so these were some of the kind of principles that you see now being manifested in the realization of this incredible project. And so it's been kind of a great kind of pleasure to see it evolve over the last couple of years, and really kind of take on a life. And it's incredible to also see how it's now becoming an exemplar for sustainable development within the country. I wanted to kind of show you one project which is at a larger scale, but it also kind of brings together these different preoccupations together. This is a project called Seongjung. It's outside of Beijing, and it was for a large kind of master plan kind of community. And again, located along the kind of agricultural zone, around the eastern side of China. It's on this kind of, what you see in pink is the historic core, and then you have the major kind of green belts. So this site was located on one of the peripheries of the city, a fairly large kind of, almost a 20,000 acre site, so pretty large. And you can see it's the scale comparison of Seongjung with Manhattan Island. You can see how Central Park, is a small fragment within it. So we were faced with this incredible large city, large site in a city that's incredibly dense and growing quite rapidly, but also had a great legacy of arts and cultural institutions within it, as well as a strong legacy of active agriculture. So we want to kind of look at ways of how do we kind of combine contemporary community development while preserving and enhancing existing kind of assets that were located on the site. And the vision kind of really revolved around preserving a lot of that agriculture, really making that part of the lifestyle, the culture, and the economy of the site, but also introducing other kind of elements that would really help create a thriving new town, around design, around culture and arts that I was just talking about, alternative medicine that would emerge from the agriculture and the farming industry there. Experimental technologies, especially around renewables, solar cells, soil remediation, as well as research and development around the biotech kind of industry. So again, being able to kind of look at different ways of creating a sustainable kind of ecosystem. And this was a kind of an initial sketch that I kind of came up with when we went to the site, was to really kind of create a sense of compact clusters around some of the existing hydrology system where you see the blue canals, and really kind of preserve the existing kind of farmlands within the core. So really kind of inversing the paradigm of the city-farm relationships. Typically you have the farms that are kind of away from the cities or towns, and here we were trying to inverse the paradigm by really kind of combining the two together to create a very different model of sustainable, green development. And so here's the kind of a larger kind of illustrative kind of vision. And what you see again in the dark red is the new communities and urban development areas, everything that has mixed use, housing, culture. And in the center, you see this zone of a very rich and diverse array of farming systems that includes even aquaculture, as well as a whole host of series of planting systems that are kind of native to this region. And you can see the typical paradigm of development that happens in these cities, where everything is kind of crammed together. And you can see this paradigm all over Southeast Asia, where density and growth lead to, developments that don't really have that sense of place, a sense of identity, or the sense of social responsibility that, Sabina Park is trying to impart as well. And so our goal was to try and, again, try a completely different paradigm, where you had, fairly high density, but you also had places for people to kind of recreate, for schools, for amenities. Those are the things that you see in pink, for hydrological systems to manage stormwater in a natural way. And the integration with, again, farming and different kind of systems. Again, preserving existing patterns, but, elevating them to the 21st century. So this is an image of a typical kind of neighborhood that exists within here. And again, here you'd find both low-rise and medium-rise kind of developments situated within it. And then this is kind of an important slide. And these, again, similar ideas that we looked at when we were kind of planning for Sabina Park, was to look at the different sustainability parameters, from solar orientation to channeling cooling breezes, to looking at the host of amenities that would be accessible to people within a very kind of short walk, to the idea of walkability and a pedestrian-friendly kind of community, access to the right amount of open space. And again, all of these become parameters that create both a diverse as well as an inclusive community. And I think this idea of inclusion is becoming more and more kind of important with all the social kind of movements that are happening, globally. And here's kind of an image of what that community would look like, in the evenings, where you do have places for people to kind of gather, whether it's for food or retail. But again, really harnessing those spaces to kind of create a great sense of place. And the idea of kind of also villages and resettlement, again, rather than displacing them from the city, how do you kind of actually integrate them within existing, within new kind of developments to, again, create this sense of larger inclusion? And so we looked at these strategies of really kind of imbibing people close to employment centers, and really kind of connecting them back, as well as giving them training for new jobs. Again, as industries evolve, as technologies evolve, the labor force needs to kind of evolve with them as well. So again, really creating a role for these people within the development. And then tied to this was this whole idea of livability and economy around the city. I think it's equally important to make sure that there's an economical argument as well that that really kind of grounds the sustainability practices that are part of any development that's being created. And so here you can see the kind of diverse array of farming systems that go from orchards to community gardens to kind of more kind of quasi-industrial kind of systems, but all, again, integrated within a very tight-knit, urban community. And then also the opportunity to do research and test things and really create these as live test beds for experimentation, for prototyping, and really advancing systems around farming in this case, which are not necessarily being given the same attention to, and really kind of helping elevate them to a new level. And so we looked at different aspects from land use coverage, how much area to be given to development versus open space. So it was almost like a 50-50 ratio, but also kind of making sure that there was enough porosity to make sure this rainwater was really kind of harnessed in the right way, and we were providing infiltration capacity throughout the site. And so you can see overlaid with this system was a very rich system of hydrology and ecology that tied the different systems together. And equally important was this idea of waste management. And again, I think this is very important for sustainable developments to make sure that you create a closed loop system, especially around food, water, waste, and power as well. So really kind of creating these systems and combining them together so that they can be monitored in a very intentional way. But also this sense of diversity. And I think this is where Sabina Park also is successful in that it caters to a pretty broad demographic. And here we were being very intentional to look at different typologies that would cater to different demographics, from young professionals to farmers to the creative urban professionals to young couples, old people, creating the right sense of typologies for them, but also the amenities and open spaces that would really lead to a holistic community. And within that, you can see that rather than the typical pattern that you would find in urban development in China or other cities in Southeast Asia, where you have one kind of pattern that's repeated, this kind of shows you a diversity of different types that are kind of arrayed through the site. Again, creating a sense of inclusion, but also catering to different socioeconomic demographics. And here's again an image of this, all of this kind of getting integrated together in one holistic system. And the different kind of range of uses, and you can see how all of this gets integrated with even existing villages. We also kind of spend a lot of time looking at typologies and really kind of learning from existing vernacular patterns that are there within the region and evolving contemporary 21st century ways of living and working. So again, creating live-work communities. And again, these are some ideas that we had initially kind of even discussed as part of Savina Park. And especially now with the whole COVID situation and people working from home, it takes on the whole live-work idea is really kind of flipped on its head and become more pervasive than one would have imagined. So again, really kind of imbibing that within the community, as well as the landscape and open space systems that would allow both people to have a sense of release, but also a sense of connection to the broader outdoors. So here's an image of what a typical cluster could look like, and you can see the integration of green and open space systems, as well as the agriculture coming into it. And here, as you kind of start zooming out, you can see how this system gets integrated across multiple scales and really starts becoming the fabric of a larger kind of city development. So you can even imagine, and this is again something that we spoke about at Savina Park, that this is one kind of type of development, and if that's successful, which it seems to be, given its the way it's taking off and its integration with sustainability, that could become a model for a broader type of development around that area. And I think that's very important to start at that smaller scale and really look at ways of elevating that and creating it at a larger scale that would have a larger impact on the community. And again, some images of showing how density can then get played into it, connections with transit, some other kind of different fabrics that are kind of emerging out of it. So I'll stop here with this image, which really kind of shows how over time, and this would be like a 20-year vision, this would become a thriving place to be. It's a place that is very different. It creates a new paradigm in terms of not only sustainable development, but also creating a new way of living with nature. And I think that's an important part for us to all think about, especially in cities like, or in countries like the Philippines or Southeast Asia, where climate change, sea level rise, and resiliency are becoming very important factors for us to consider. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you very, very much for that indeed. And yes, we just had Romil show us how not only their disciplines truly do come alive in their different projects. It's not just beautiful design with function. It's beyond that. It's preserving culture and resources that are already there and adding systems that really are holistic in nature. And thank you very, very much for that, Romil, again, taking us through that, how you start small scale, then build it up to something more ideal that's a model for everybody. I also want to add that Sasaki Associates is behind the master planning and conceptual design of Savina Park, ARTHALAND sustainable mixed-use community in the fast-evolving locale of Binyan, Laguna. It's right beside De La Salle University Laguna campus. It's a master-planned neighborhood that is generously planned with 60% green and open spaces. That's actually how Romil started his presentation, if you remember, that even in dense cities or growth environments, you can still see the green and open spaces. At this point, we would like to remind everyone and encourage Everyone, please do send in your questions for our panelists via the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom panels, all right? So this is the last speaker after all, so please do send in your questions. So for our third speaker, let us now welcome someone from the architectural firm Leandro V. Locsin Partners, credited with having helped shape Manila's skyline and architectural landscape. One of the firm's earliest commissions set the architectural idiom for subsequent buildings on what was then the frontier of urban development and what has become Manila's premier business address. Our third speaker will share his insights on how an environment, when designed holistically in thoughtful, people-centered ways, can be flexible and allow a sense of place to develop and evolve over time. Everyone, please welcome the administrator and design consultant for Leandro V. Locsin Partners. We have Mr. Andy Locsin Jr. Hi, Andy. Good morning.
Good morning, and welcome to everyone. Thanks for having us here. My name is Andy Locsin, and I've been asked by ARTHALAND to say a few words on designing for a sustainable future. And I wear two hats on this project. One as a representative of companies that used to own these properties, and another as a design consultant for Leandro V. Locsin Partners Architects, a firm that's been involved with the Savina Park project and many other projects in the area. And I hope you will indulge me today. I think that we're probably going to go over time because there's a lot to say. I also ask you to forgive my COVID haircut, something that Gopal and Romil thankfully have taken care of. Unfortunately, on this side, we're a little bit hairy. So I'll keep this talk rather informal and loose and easy, much in the spirit of what remains of my hair over here. So I'll begin. Critical to conceptualizing, designing, and developing sustainably is understanding the roots, history, and physical conditions of a parcel of land in order to draw upon these elements for inspiration and a vision. It's important to understand the framework and what we are all a part of. And I love the fact that Gopal started out on a global level. Ramil took us to sort of an urban situation, a large part of a city. And hopefully I'll take you into the property itself on a very small scale, sort of the toenail of the development when seen as a microcosm. So I've divided my talk into three parts to give you a framework and a history of the property and the area. The first part I tend to call sort of taking the long view, sort of a larger framework of the context of the place. Our family represents the third generation of being involved with this property, with the land. It was acquired by my grandfather in the aftermath of the World War II in 1948. And he always saw his family's responsibility as being enlightened stewards of the land and the people upon it, not as traditional owners as we commonly understand in other societies. Our involvement began as a sugar production operation, hence the reference to the sugar farm many years ago. But by the end of the 60s, the enterprise had turned into a model operation with related agro-industrial industries and enterprises. It was a model of industrial peace and management relations. Kamlooping very quietly supported an entire social and economic ecosystem consisting of elements that were reflective of the company's and the family's values. Schools and educational institutions, an industrial hospital, labor unions, markets, water and power utilities, financial services, national security, and an active spiritual community and athletic programs that come with making a community. It was a rather interesting context to grow up in. The kids of all these stakeholders, Kamlooping nurtured a mixed community. The owners, managers, staff, and labor living together in one place in an old town. We played basketball, baseball, golf, and tennis together. We visited and ate in each other's houses. We learned the old games and pastimes, Filipino games, patintero, chato, holen, trompo. We climbed trees, picked mangoes, and kaimito, star apple, shot slingshots. We learned about nature, fighting spiders, frogs, birds, snakes, and insects. We went to the village market and just hung out, swapping tall tales. There's an old saying in the Philippines, we were just being Kanto boys and Kanto girls. It was an integrated community where neighbors knew, looked out for, and helped each other. We walked everywhere together, to work, to school, to church, the recreational areas. One of the family's second generation members, in fact, married into the community, happily married into the community. And so the integration was complete and completely authentic. By the late 70s, by the early 70s, the first and second generation of Yulos knew that there was a limit to what sugar and the associated agro-industrial industries could provide. Stewardship required responsible planning. The Yulos undertook something called the Kamlooping Urban Project and established one of the first industrial estates in the country, basically to address the full range of economic strata, a recreational hub with a golf club, the preservation and greening of the upland watershed. And in keeping with the responsibility of that stewardship, and please note that the word stewardship is an important one to this. I think you'll hear a little bit more in the presentation going forward. The family sought in 1976 to expand and establish new economic opportunity, not only for the resident workers of Kamlooping, but to the wider public by inviting outside partners into the effort of stewardship in the economy. The four municipalities of Calamba, Cabuyao, Santa Rosa, and Binyan incorporated the Kamlooping Urban Project into their municipal plans in the late 70s. Eventually, the Yulo companies emerged from the political and economic turmoil of the 70s and 80s, still intact but in pretty rough shape. In the early 90s, the agro-industrial operations were clearly no longer viable given the proximity to Metro Manila, and the unfavorable cost of agro-industrial operations basically surfaced, and the developmental pressures bearing on the area with the growth corridors of Metro Manila and southern Luzon. The Yulos then, to move forward, and their affiliates, successfully sought out major partners and developers who were closely aligned with the idea of stewardship, environmental responsibility and sustainable development, and who could create opportunities for employment, education, ownership, investment, not only for the residents of Kamlooping, but for the region. The agro-industrial operations were then wound down over an extended 5 to 10 year period, intended to transition the Kamlooping community into developmental scenarios to replace the former agro-industrial concerns. The transition has not been an easy one, but the progress of myriad projects in the Kamlooping area convinces most of the third generation that handing over direct stewardship to a number of able, aligned, and experienced hands has made for a more democratic, lively, dynamic, and engaged developmental outcomes. Most importantly, the Kamlooping area has become home to a diverse mix of schools, commerce, manufacturing, residences, recreational developments, and places of worship with a very, very wide range of stakeholders, from the original residents to hundreds of thousands of people today who have come to work, live, and play in the area over the last 20 years. Moving on to the second part of my talk, and this concerns Binyan, the actual area where we are located. It is within this larger development of history that our family began to undertake the planning of the northernmost corner of Kamlooping in Binyan. Again, I'll say this because it's important. A part of conceptualizing, designing, and developing sustainably is to understand the roots, history, physical conditions of a parcel of land in order to draw upon these elements for inspiration and a vision. We began to consider the many components and an organic process that would be required to create a community with some authenticity. Following the developmental sequence that I described a little earlier, in 1989, we invited developer partners who established Laguna Technopark and San Jose Village that formed the initial core of an employment base and a residential base. In the early 90s, our family decided to focus on an important advocacy, education, something very near and dear to our hearts because we've been involved with it all our lives. And De La Salle University was invited in to form the core for the educational component in the beginnings of what we were calling a university town. Along with other brave friends, our family became involved with the formation of the Beacon School in 2000 and the Beacon Academy in 2009. And subsequently, the Beacon Academy was likewise invited to establish a campus that delivers a secondary school education of an international caliber. The two schools offer the IB, or the International Baccalaureate Program, sort of a globally recognized way of delivering an education. The school is going on its 20th year, and Beacon Academy just celebrated its 10th year on campus in Binyan. So, to the third part of this presentation, how does ARTHALAND and Savina Park fit into this entire equation, that history? In turn, it was within this framework of a university town that we invited ARTHALAND to establish the first dedicated residential project with an aim to set a very, very high bar. And from the outset of our discussions, we found terrific alignment on a series of values and goals. Among these, sustainability, the idea basically of energy saving, low carbon footprints, passive cooling design, water saving features. Bottom line here is some of the principles of ARTHALAND as developers and myself have over the years been involved with WWF Philippines. We have sat on their boards and contributed basically to the brain trust of WWF in conservation. So that was a huge commonality. Second was an appreciation of history and culture. Again, there are some of the principals in ARTHALAND who are very involved in history, sort of our cultural past. And this is one of the things that commonality that was shared with our family. Authenticity, the understanding the importance of time in order to develop a community. We felt there's nothing worse in a way than simply sort of doing the instant noodle formula, add water, mix it, and eat. We prefer slow cooked food. And it's with that slow cooked food, recognizing the critical sort of role of time, which leads to the development of authenticity in a community. Education, another area of alignment. Under basically referencing many overseas academic and corporate campuses, the issues of scale, features, amenities. Many of us in the ARTHALAND group, and all were in the Locsin side, attended many of these schools overseas. And ARTHALAND made the huge effort to travel, to look at the pegs upon which we would base the design of this community, of this little toenail, so to speak. They went to university communities in the US, on the West Coast, on the East Coast, to Singapore, basically around the world to reference sort of what these university communities were like. There was also a huge issue of shared values within what we call the middle sector. Some of you, and I think the Sasaki guys will be very familiar with this. Ramil, I'm sure, has read all this stuff. There's this thing called the New Urbanism Theory that was established, basically written about in the mid 80s or so. It sort of posits the idea that when you design for a new community and you look at the communities that are most successful, that are sustainable and make sense, okay, you're addressing the entire gamut of basically the economic sector, okay? And in a way, sort of the A pluses in that economic sector and maybe the E minuses are sort of outliers in a sense. There are a bunch of peculiarities in the A plus sector and the E minus sector that render themselves a little bit outside the special considerations. But just about everybody else, from the A, flat A's, A minuses, right down to the D's, share some common values. And what are those? People typically look for education, safety, quality. You know, we used to sort of joke about this idea of a kubao done right. Everyone else looks for these predictabilities when they look at a community to live in. People want access to amenities, to transport, easy safety and predictability. So in the firm, we try to focus on that particular sort of aspect of design at Locsin Partners. For us, there is a huge relevance of good design for all sectors. Okay, we have this sort of mantra within the architectural firm that says basically that good design and sustainability in particular does not have to be the exclusive province of the wealthy. Okay, things just have to work, flatline all the way around. And every sector, no matter how you look at it, deserves to have design well thought out. It has to work basically for everyone. We wanted to throw away the old idea of sort of designing down the markets. We feel that actually equal consideration, equal thought, and equal passion, more than anything, has to go in by the designers and planners into the formation of a new community. And that goes for developers too. There was also alignment on inclusivity, the idea that you put mixed uses on a site rather than the hyper-zoned model of planning. If you look at every great city in the world, there is a sensibility to putting residential, recreational, the economic drivers, work, education, sort of all within reasonable proximity of each other, because there are great efficiencies to all of that. The ability actually to sort of lower the use of fossil fuels to get around. And a great potential basically of technology to solve modern day problems, something that ARTHALAND espouses right up front in its role as a developer. These were all alignments. We loved very much sort of the idea of the nimbleness of thought, the commitment to out-of-the-box thinking to solve future problems. And finally, a commitment basically to a lower density of development. Meaning to say, as developers, it didn't make sense for us, for ARTHA and from the designer side, to max everything out. We saw the equivalence basically of somewhat lower density to a better quality of life. These were all the alignments for why we ended up basically inviting ARTHALAND in. And Savina Park's design brief and directive towards responsible and sustainable design reflects everything that I've just mentioned, all the concepts. In many ways, the development brings back some of the advantages and charms of an old world approach, that sort of life that I described in the old Kamlooping, okay, to living in circulation, but more importantly, also tests new parameters of what is possible in sustainable mixed-use development through technology and thoughtful design. The project proponents hope that the residents and visitors to Savina Park will find the following aspects attractive: walkability around the neighborhood and easy access to schools, recreational amenities, open spaces, neighborhood retail, and workplaces. Basically, an excellent pedestrian experience. There's a very good discipline in the planning of Savina Park. There's excellent visibility onto the street, the idea of eyes on the street and open sight lines for security and defensibility. It's efficient and human in scale. We believe that Romil and his team at Sasaki did a fantastic job with the layouts for the master plan and the circulation. There's an easy balance between communal space and the privacy when desired, meaning to say there's all this open space of shared experience that are possible if you want to interact with your neighbors. It's very easy. The spaces present opportunities to do that. And yet it's easy enough to retreat into your little kingdom because of the architectural design of these individual units. And it does this in the most natural, easy way. I think you'll see that through the planning and the architecture. Very much so also this idea of comfortable, passively cooled villa units with tall living spaces, natural light, and good ventilation with generous living quarters. In so many ways, these features echo the old Kamlooping's past. There was resonance basically with ARTHALAND in programming this project. And yet, the villas also feature the current and future. Reasonable utility costs through the energy and water saving devices and features, low heat gain and low noise strategies through material specifications, embedded security and communication technology into the project, durable, thoughtfully sourced, and high-performing construction material. There's not much, when one looks at the entire project, that was left out of the brief. We felt that ARTHALAND and Savina Park committed to put the money in the right places. In Filipino parlance, not much on the borloloy, on the sort of extraneous stuff, but everything into the substance of design, the important stuff, the fundamentals of sustainability and good architecture. To wrap up a little bit, as we step into a challenging world, really an almost new reality as a result of the pandemic, most of us have come to recognize that a reset is necessary. We have all very suddenly come to appreciate what is truly important and how humanity must learn to live a more reasonable, less indulgent, and more thoughtful life. There's never been a time when our own personal ways of living has such potential impact on those who live around us in the pandemic. We believe that those who choose to come to Savina Park will appreciate the relatively low density of the development, the idea of choice to interact or not, the proximity of essential amenities, facilities, workplaces, and services to reduce fuel consumption, the emphasis and orientation towards the outdoor external environment and an orientation towards nature, living near neighbors with a healthy mix of skills, professions, and abilities. I cannot stress this enough. It is actually this mix of people and the possibility of people of different backgrounds coming together that creates real authenticity in a project. Another critical aspect of this is the proximity to a center of learning, culture, and information, a university town. This is something that I don't think is well understood by the markets yet. But those of us who have been involved in university life are very, very clear on this. The communities that arise around an educational institution, it's a remarkable thing. Suddenly, you become much more well-informed, very current. You imbibe sort of the idea of art, history, and culture, and it makes for sort of a much more vibrant context in which to live. Somehow a very human way to live. And I mean that in the best sense. Okay. There's also the absolute commitment to connectivity through technology that ARTHALAND espouses, and the efforts at sustainability to responsibly conserve and preserve our resources as good stewards. To conclude, Savina Park is very well positioned to face the future. The project's proponents hope not only to enter into a new phase of responsible and sustainable stewardship, I believe it's their aim, And maybe it's a little bit insidious. And that's okay with us, okay? To very quietly, gently, and correctly, to conscript all of us into that exciting stewardship that is cognizant of a valued past and illuminates our collective and necessary path forward into the future. So with that, thanks for listening. I'm sorry for going over time. Sometimes I talk too much, but we'll be happy to take your questions, and back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Once again, that was Andy for sharing not only his vision as a landowner, but truly, in his own words, taking on the role of stewards. I especially loved when you shared what living as an integrated community is like and how you move forward to achieve what is offered today, a human way to live. Thank you very, very much, Andy. Leandro Viloxin Partners, by the way, is Savina Park's architect of record and is behind the architectural design of Savina Park's villas and amenities, having set a very high bar indeed when it comes to sustainability. Now, as Andy said, we are about to take in some questions, so please take this last opportunity to type in your questions in the Q&A button below. But before we welcome back all of our three speakers for our Q&A, we would like to share with you this short clip on Savina Park. Once again, we'd like to share that ARTHALAND Corporation is the first real estate developer in Southeast Asia to achieve platinum certification for both LEED for neighborhood development and LEED for homes in tandem. All right, everybody, this is the part where we will be sharing or asking the questions you sent to our three panelists. Hi again to Gopal, Romil, and Andy. So first things first, to Gopal. If there could only be one, if there is only one characteristic or feature of a sustainable community, what would it be? There could only be one.
You're putting me in a spot, but I think I just remember that, you know, as US Green Building Council, we just made a vision line. So I think that possibly stands for it, which says healthy people in healthy places equals healthy economy. So that for me in one line encapsulates what sustainable development is all about.
Love that. People, places, economy, with all one word, healthy. That's the whole point. Thank you for that, Gopal. Okay, so to Romel and Andy, I'll put you in the spot now. Since Gopal pointed that out, healthy people, places, and economy, how can this be reflected in our projects, particularly Savina Park? Romil, healthy people, places lead to healthy economies.
I mean, for me, an important aspect is the building systems. especially making sure that there is the right kind of, air quality that is available, that the energy considerations are taken into account, that you have, tight envelopes, so that the buildings are not contributing, in a negative way, but in fact creating something that's net positive. There's integration of solar or photovoltaics and other systems that would encourage, passive ventilation, as well as air exchanges. So I think bringing together these systems in a very sensitive and considerate manner for the climate and the context would be a very important consideration to creating a healthy and livable environment.
I love that. Again, can you imagine buildings giving back instead of taking or draining? Thank you for that, Romel. How about you, Andy? Especially in the context of your story from your family, this concept characteristic of healthy people and places definitely equals to a healthy economy. Andy?
I'm 100% in agreement, not only with both, but very strongly with what Gopal says. Okay, if you were want to pick one particular aspect of any community that makes it sustainable, it is the people. At the end of the day, it is when that community comes to a fundamental understanding of their role in the planet and how they live their lives that ensures actually connectivity and sustainability going forward. We can build all the most amazing things. We can build technology into these projects. But if you do not have the commitment and the investment of mind and soul, people, into those concepts, then they could be all for naught. Yeah. At the end of the day, the reason actually all three of us are here, Romil, Gopal, ourselves, and the developers, at the end of the day, it's about people. Right?
And definitely how all people should not just live, but be stewards. I really love when you chose that word, Andy. Everyone, not just the developers or the people building, everyone living there should be stewards too. Back to Gopal then. Gopal, this is a bit technical. If the community is already certified sustainable, is it important to have individual buildings inside the community be certified green as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because I think ARTHALAND, Savina Park has actually given a solid foundation. So by going towards a neighborhood development platinum, they have set the stage. So whoever is coming in tomorrow, it could be the commercial offices, it could be residential, it could be retail, it could be schools within. Now, every construction is going to come up can actually take the benchmark up. I think Romel talked about, and I think Isa, you also talked about it, giving back to society. So can these buildings be designed and performed to either net zero or net positive? So Savina has given a great foundation. So let's take that benchmark up and give it back to society. It's definitely possible, and I would encourage every stakeholder, developer, architect, designer who's going to be looking at coming into Savina and building up a construction. Let's take the benchmark up by going for individual buildings towards green as well. Absolutely. Yes.
Nice. Okay, level up, everybody. Again, don't just rest on your laurels. I got a question from the question box. What were the challenges in achieving sustainable development, and how can you overcome them? I think this is to Romil. What are the challenges in achieving sustainable development, and how can you overcome them? Romil, maybe Andy also in a bit.
Every time we talk about sustainable development, especially with a developer, the first question, one of the first questions is the return on investment. Like, when you put in solar panels, or if you put in a gray water recycling system, or whatever it is, that's one of the big kind of hurdles. And that's also kind of a misnomer, because with the way that we can build now in a sensible way, in a manner, and especially if you're sensitive to climate and context, and if you get the basic planning right, half your battles are won in that place. So a lot of it has to do with educating the clients, educating the developers to say, making sustainable development is not actually that far out of reach from an economic point of view. In fact, there's an economic value that you can gain from building sustainably and planning in a sustainable manner as well. So I think that's one of and once you make that mind shift or get them to make that mind shift, things fall into place, quite easily. So we've had to, it's funny that in all of our projects, we've had to go through this process, but it's happy to note that at the end, we've always been able to make a shift towards a sustainable kind of approach, to a developer project. So I think that's one of the challenges that we often kind of encounter.
Actually, Ramil, your answer also pretty much answers this question from Michael Banak. What kind of construction premium is there for building a LEED platinum development? You already mentioned this in your presentation, 20% at least on top of what's usually for initial investment. And definitely the time frame to recoup these costs, you also already broke it down for us. So, and Andy, anything you'd like to add to what Ramil said?
Yeah, actually, again, seconding that, always the issue to begin with is cost.
Yeah, initial investments.
Initial investment, and that comes actually with sort of a short-term framework. In other words, people are looking immediately. Developers will look at sort of how do I get that back and in what time very quickly. It's taken some years. I mean, in the early 90s, our firm had been trying to sell people on the idea of building sustainably, building green. And, mid 90s, we couldn't find anybody to even take it up. The amazing thing is that it's become a criterion for value today, for good reason. Proof is in the eating. Essentially, when people shift their minds to realize that actually a project doesn't exist on the day you sell, okay? It exists for time. Again, this whole idea of the temporal nature. And over time, if we did the planning right, as Ramil says, things generate savings. And that is as good as money in the pocket, frankly, if you were going to talk on sort of such basic terms. Not only money in the pocket, but absolutely good for the people you've just sold to, and your own portfolio. So it's completely sensible. How do you overcome the challenge? Basically, it's education. It's education. The data is out there, and you can show it on paper. You recoup that investment, and the value stays for a very long time. Yeah, essentially that's the key.
Living legacies, definitely. To Gopal, are sustainable communities responsive to pandemics? Bringing it to this time. Are sustainable communities responsive to pandemics?
I think it's automatically answered that question because in the last 4-5 months, lot of clients and stakeholders who have actually got into LEED buildings have come back to us and said that we were able to restart our offices very easily because I'll just give a simple example. Now, in LEED buildings, we talk about the space per employee. In short, it's nothing but social distancing. So it is already there as part of the LEED process.
Plus ventilation.
Ventilation. You talk about fresh air, inside a building, right? So you talk about sunlight coming in. These have therapeutic effects on the air as well. So every aspect, whether it is social distancing, whether it is the health, I think Romel talked about the indoor air quality or the indoor environmental quality. And people are even taking process. For example, you talk about, sanitation, you talk about cleaning. Now, these are all processes within LEED. So green buildings inherently had the advantage over a non-green in facing up to pandemics.
Nice. Here's more. What strategies, features in a sustainable community can encourage social cohesion, even in times of pandemic? Now it's, what, again, strategies or features in sustainable communities encourage social cohesion. I think this is still for Gopal, and let's see the point of view of Andy and Romel in a bit.
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. I think Romel brought it up beautifully. So I think I've got a different take on this. Now, if you talk about social cohesion, let me start with, let's say, as an individual, I think we need to be, having peace within ourselves. Now, I think Romil spoke about that. I think the way I think Savina has been designed, just to take an example. Now, you are living very close with nature, right? So, and a lot of things which are going to come up are going to impact the circadian rhythm, as we call it. So once you start living close with nature, you are actually at peace with yourself. Now why I'm saying that is, once you have such communities are going to be at peace with oneself, they're going to start contributing to society as well. So I see Savina Park in the future doing a lot to social cohesion. For example, projects which are going to come up, they are going to take care of the construction workers. Now, I'm giving an example. So the construction workers are going to come up and do building within Savina. They're going to be taken care. They're going to have structures to live. Their families and kids are going to have creches and schools to attend. That's within that during the construction phase. So when the construction is going to happen, the construction waste or the dust is not going to impact society outside. So those are some of the examples where course is going to happen. And Savina Park is also going to look at, for their inclusive nature, is affordable housing going to be accessible? Transport going to be accessible? What about the Gini quotient of income? So there are very interesting features which I think a community is going to build up on whatever they have. So, and Robin also talked about village resettlement. So the way I think communities are going to come up, it's going to be at peace with oneself, and it's going to be in very close harmony with the rest of the community as well.
Nice. Can I go to Andy for that? Again, it seems like all of our discussion is anchored on what you started this Q&A with. People, planet, economy, all healthy. So Andy, speaking of social cohesion, this is really, your whole presentation was centered on this. Andy?
Yeah, I'll explain a little bit and not so technically, but I think easily understood by any layperson. The way Ramil and Sasaki laid out the plan, when I say that they did an excellent job, and this whole idea of sort of a very easy and natural way of sharing communal space, and being able to be private if you want. From the planning standpoint, there's this feature at Savina Park where you have, of course, sort of the front of your structure that faces the street. And it's designed in such a way so that you have eyes on the street. Anybody sort of sees what's going on, okay? So in terms of security and knowing what's going on, it's very easy from the street side. The pretty unusual feature is that the backyard is actually a shared space. This is an unusual thing in any Philippine development. Very often you see sort of people living within walls, sort of boxes, okay? And you're sort of closed off, okay? In this particular case, there is this amazing backyard sort of feature, which really does encourage people to, as a stakeholder, to act like a stakeholder. Yeah. Okay. It presents opportunities actually for neighbors to sort of come into contact with each other, okay, because the space is shared. It's a remarkable thing. It's hard for us to explain because there are no, shall we say, existing pegs in new developments here in the Philippines. But we're absolutely certain this is going to work because this actually worked for centuries. This is sort of an old way of thinking. Communal life, of shared space, and knowing your neighbors, and having actually interaction with people. Okay? I think Sasaki's done a bang-up job in terms of actually laying out the entire master plan for that mix of sort of a commercial, residential, educational, amenities all together, right? Yeah. And making it very easy, natural for those interactions to happen. So on a very basic level, I think that exactly is the feature that encourages community.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Andy. Actually, now I'm going to put Romil on the spot with this question. Is do you think net zero by 2050, 2050, here in the Philippines is possible? Actually, it's both Gopal and Romel. But Romel?
Yeah, I think as an approach, not only the Philippines, but globally, we need to strive to get to net zero as soon as possible. And I think that's is absolutely kind of achievable, depending again on the scale of development and the way we approach it. But it has to start with the planning. You need to get the planning right, get all those kind of parameters. And I think the LEAD ND program sets you up for it, and then really tackle each kind of building. But I think tied to net zero is also, especially for Philippines, a really important issue is climate change and sea level rise. I think the entire country is incredibly vulnerable to these larger kind of forces. And so the aspect of resiliency, along with this idea of net zero, need to be looked at very carefully, as developers, as cities within the country, as well as the overall country. Needs to kind of look at it, because that's going to be one of the primary forces that's going to be impacting growth.
Thank you. Thank you for that. In fact, if I may say, ARTHALAND is committed to do it, and that it is possible with a collective effort from all stakeholders in the Philippines. I'd like to end with this one question, and it is for Andy. Andy, someone's asking, it's Annie Valencia. Would you say that traditional bahay kubo is naturally sustainable? Is a naturally sustainable structure?
Yes, in many ways, and I don't think that's exclusive to the Philippines. The idea of sort of a structure that's elevated, that's on stilts, is something that is common to many places in Southeast Asia. It's a very natural response to the area's climatological conditions. And yes, I think in many ways, the idea of a bahay kubo and how that's expressed architecturally is an open book, right? There are many ways to sort of design in that with those principles in mind. But yes, as a building type, heavier base of some sort, maybe a lighter elevated structure up off the ground, sort of a dominating roof. Yes, it's an excellent response to the natural climate.
Thank you, Andy. And for that, unfortunately, time is running out, but we appreciate all of your questions. In fact, that's the best part about webinars. When you register, we do have your email addresses, and I believe our panelists can actually reply via email. So thank you for your questions, everybody. Again, how about a virtual round of applause for Gopal Padmanabhan, Romil Chef, and Andy Locsin Jr. Gentlemen, thank you for your answers, for your presentations, but more so for the challenge of bringing it forward, that we are all stewards and that we are all stakeholders as we move forward for the Philippines. Now, we're not quite done yet with Inspiring Gentlemen. Here to share a special message, please welcome ARTHALAND Corporation's Vice Chairman and President, Mr. Jaime C. Gonzalez.
Thank you very much, Isa. It's always a pleasure to have you moderate our different activities, particularly this webinar. Isa's the daughter of one of my closest friends. It's such a pleasure to always see her. But I'd like to thank all of the speakers this morning, Gopal, Rohit, and Andy. The subject matter you spoke about is so relevant and so inspiring to us in ARTHALAND. And you've actually been able to help us quite a bit over the years in teaching us lessons of sustainability and quality development and master planning. As you all know, the logo of ARTHALAND is building sustainable legacies. And this speaks directly into all of the topics covered this morning. We've got this unwavering commitment to sustainability. As you all know, all of our developments are 100% sustainable. We work very closely with U.S. Green Building Council. And we really treasure the master plan that Rohit and his team developed for us for Savina Park, as we are working closely with Andy on the different elements in that development. Our approach is truly inclusive. We start out even at the time that our projects are being constructed. Savina Park, as Andy said, is really the start. We hope to develop even far greater areas consistent with the principles that we've adopted in Savina Park. No? So we cater to all levels. What we say is that our developments are best in class, regardless of what class it's aimed at. No? I have to add something about the cost of sustainable development. Of course, it costs a little bit more. Of course, a bit more complicated. But the challenge to our organization is we just have to be a bit more efficient, a lot more efficient. But more importantly, we have this mindset that the complication and the cost of sustainable development is an investment for future generations. The savings in energy and water does not accrue to the developer. It accrues to the residents and the tenants of our developments, which is fine for us because eventually we will see a return on our investment. It may not be in my generation, but it certainly will be in the next one and the generation of my grandchildren. As I've always said, this business is not only about making money, it's leaving something behind. And I think it's exactly what Andy was saying about stewardship. No? And if we don't start now, when else will we start? Thank you again, everyone, and thank you for such inspiring talks. Thank you, Isa.
Thank you very, very much as well. Once again, that was ARTHALAND Corporation's Vice Chairman and President, Mr. Jaime C. Gonzalez. And with that, thank you, everybody, to all of our webinar attendees. We appreciate you being here today. And if you would like to request for a copy of this webinar, a recorded version will be available for you. Just simply reach out to your ARTHALAND contacts and we will inform you how you can get a copy. Again, for anyone who would like a recorded version of today's forest webinar, it's the first so far. It will be a series of forest webinars just for you. Please do hang out or stand by for updates for our next ones. But in the meantime, thanks again for joining us. I'm Isa Litton, and on behalf of ARTHALAND, please do enjoy the rest of your day and be safe, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Isa.